So after last weekend, Alabama fans everywhere have turned their attention to the South Carolina game in hopes that the Tide have a strong showing. But that hasn't stopped analysts from across the nation giving their takes about Alabama. And today, we need to unpack one of those takes. Because Joel Klatt had some strong words about the Tide, comparing this Alabama team to a Lincoln Riley Oklahoma team in the Big 12. We need to unpack this statement. We need to talk about it. We need to evaluate where Alabama is, where they can go, this statement, and talk about the game against South Carolina. But before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I have got to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Do you agree with Klatt? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And as I alluded to in the intro, there have been no shortage of takes from around the nation about Alabama and the loss to Vandy, but one that really stood out to me was Joel Klatt when he compared this Alabama team to a Lincoln Riley coached Oklahoma team where they were going to score a bunch of points, but you were going to score a bunch of points on them. And whenever we look at Alabama this season, the offense continues to impress. The evolution of Jalen Milroe, the development of Jalen Milroe, it's evident. It's in your face every single game. On the heels of a game where he torched Georgia's secondary, he continued to impress against Vanderbilt. And I know there are going to be some people jump in the comments and say, but the fumble, but the interception. The interception was much like the interception in the Georgia game, a bang-bang play and not one that you can 100% fault the quarterback. That's football. Those plays happen. And if your quarterback goes through the season and isn't making terrible decisions and those are the interceptions, the turnovers that happen, you take that. Every day you take that. And then when we look at the fumble, that was just unfortunate. Right tackle didn't pick up the assignment. Free rusher hits Jalen, fumble. But outside of that, there's nothing to criticize right now from Milroe. He is picking apart defenses. His deep ball accuracy is still there. His short to intermediate throws, which is what everybody wanted to see. If you looked in the offseason, you couldn't have a conversation about Jalen Milroe. Believe you me, we tried over here on this channel without the comments being flooded about, but what about his short and intermediate passing? He is flexing it this season. The offense is able to score quickly and a lot of points. In fact, against Vanderbilt, they possessed the ball for 17 minutes and had 35 points. The offense is high-powered, and they're going to score. But after that Vanderbilt performance, many people are looking at the Tide defense and questioning that unit in particular. And really, if we want to be brutally honest, it extends past Vandy and into the second half of that Georgia game. Now, if we are talking in the interest of fairness, the second half of the Georgia game is really fascinating to me. And the reason why it's so fascinating is it's very difficult to defend a team when you know all four downs are open to them. What I mean when I say that is Georgia was going to go for it on fourth down. They had absolutely nothing to lose. They got punched in the face repeatedly in the first half against Alabama, and in the second half they said, well, it can't get much worse than what it is. We're going to go for it every single time. And whenever you're a defense playing that, it's difficult to key in on tendencies and what that offense wants to accomplish because you know third down is essentially second down. That means the offense can do a lot of different things. The playbook is completely open to them. And that's a nuanced conversation. But even through the nuance, I thought Alabama's defense did a much better job in the first half against Georgia, mixing coverages up, confusing Carson Beck. And in the instances where they did it in the second half, they continued to have some success. There's a play that stands out to me where they showed single high safety, Malachi dropping into the box. Well, that was just eye candy. He dropped back into a two high safety look, and Beck almost threw an interception once again because Alabama had disguised coverages. They did that really successfully in the first half against Georgia. And even when we look at Alabama's defense this whole year, there have been drives where teams have been able to extend drives. There have been sequences where teams have been able to have success. But Alabama's defense, up until the second half against Georgia and Vandy, had played well. In fact, they were one of the best third down defenses in the country. But then you get to Georgia. And like I said, that's a nuanced conversation because even though Georgia wasn't getting it on third down, they were getting it on fourth down. I think part of that is the offense is completely open. Then you get to Vandy. And Vandy converted way too many third downs. And it's left many people questioning and wondering what this defense is going to be able to do going forward. Personally, I think whenever this defense is mixing up coverages, they've shown they can have success. They did very well in the first half against Georgia. And really, my biggest question for Alabama's defense right now is, who are you? Are you the unit we saw through the early portions of the year that, sure, they had things they could work on, every defense out there does? Or are you the unit we saw against Vandy? Because I've made it no secret that, in my opinion, when I go back and watch that Vandy game, yes, there's blame to go around. I didn't think execution was very good, but I also didn't think that the players were put in a position to execute as often as I would like. Meaning, I think that some of the calls made it harder than it should have for Alabama's defense. And I've not hid that fact. I've put it more on scheme than the players. And when I say scheme, I see people saying, oh, well, the nickel defense can work. Of course it can. I'm not saying scheme in the terms of, oh, the 4-2-5 is not going to work. Teams run nickel a lot. That's not my contention. It's the usage of the scheme. It's the instances of having two bandits on the field, a defensive tackle, a wolf, against a team that wants to run it on you. And now you've given them a light box. Or maybe you're in 3 down linemen and your wolf is standing up, and now you have 6 blockers accounting for 3 to 4 defensive guys. You're giving them a numbers advantage. That's what I mean when I'm saying scheme. It's not that saying the nickel defense can't work. We watched it work last year. We've watched it work for years. It's the nuances of how you're using it, and specifically the nuances of Womack being a little lighter in times in the box. Putting 3 down defensive guys, and then your wolf is standing up, especially against a team that is going to be formidable in the middle and try and attack the edges. Well, now you're asking your wolf to fight through a whole lot just to get to the point of attack. That's what I mean when I'm talking scheme, not the nickel defense as a whole, but some of the uses of how Womack is using his version of this 4-2-5. That's what I'm talking about. I think South Carolina is going to be a great opportunity for Alabama to show everybody who they are. And as Klatt is concerned, this was not a good outing for Alabama. I don't think you're going to find an Alabama fan anywhere that would tell you that. But I do find it to be a little bit premature putting this on the Tide, especially if they go out this weekend, rebound against a quarterback that is mobile, against a good running back and a pretty darn good South Carolina defense, especially up front. That defensive front has been playing ferocious football. If Alabama's defense goes out there and has a great day, Alabama's offense continues to do what they do, and Alabama gets a big win, we're now looking at this statement like, okay, maybe it was a bit premature. And that's where I think we are. One thing we have got to remember is this is still the growing phase for not only the coaches, but a lot of the players as well. You have a lot of young guys on this defense, and even the guys that are veterans, they just went from what Saban and them were doing to a new defensive coordinator. There's going to be a learning period. And unfortunately, I think that resulted in a loss against Vandy, where I don't think that there was enough adjustments made from the defensive schematic perspective. But I also don't think the execution was great. Then after the game, you have Malachi Moore talking about we need to get the defensive calls in quicker. That's not great to hear. So I disagree with Klatt only because it's too soon. And up until that game, Alabama was one of the best third down defenses in the nation. And even against Georgia, they still came out of the game as one of the best third down defenses in the nation, because Georgia, once again, whenever we get into the nuance and the context of the conversation, had all 4 downs available to them. And Georgia did the bulk of their work on 4th down. So for Alabama, I want to see that aggressive defense that we saw in the first half against Georgia, that was sending pressure, that was confusing looks, because against Vandy, I didn't see any of that. And if it was there at a negligible rate. Against Georgia in that first half, Womack was showing Carson Beck full out blitz multiple times, and sometimes he would bring it, sometimes he would drop guys. He had Carson Beck confused, but against Vanderbilt, that team, they'd pretty much well figured out what Alabama wanted to do defensively, and they continued to attack it over and over and over and over again. Because nothing was mixed up. Nothing was done to confuse the quarterback, to cause chaos. Against South Carolina, chaos needs to be caused. So I do believe it's a bit premature to say Alabama is a Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma team. Because one of the truths we know in college football, I'm not saying you have to have the number one offense or the number one defense to win it, but you must be a complete football team. You cannot rely on one side of the ball in entirety and expect to win national championships. The data just shows us otherwise. There have only been 3 teams since 2000 to win a national championship while outside the top 35 scoring defenses in the nation. So you don't have to have the best defense, you don't have to have the best offense, but you need to be a complete football team. And I believe Alabama can be that. But they have got to have strong showings the rest of the year. They have got to identify who they are defensively. Because once again, I'm not worried in the slightest about Alabama's offense. I'd like to see the running backs used more, and part of the reason I want to see that is the running backs are very talented, 1, and 2, it's going to make Jalen Milroe even more dangerous whenever a defense is sitting there looking at Alabama's offense and saying, I don't know whether they're going to give it to Jam or Justice. I don't know whether Jalen's going to take it, or I don't know if they're going to pass. Everything is open. In my opinion, it's been a little bit easier to key in on, okay, well, if they're going to run, it'll probably be with Jalen, giving the defense one less thing to worry about. I think that Alabama hasn't utilized the running backs, but in fairness against Vandy, whenever you get in that hole and you know you have a quarterback operating at such an elite level right now, being able to dissect defenses the way that he has been, you let him do his thing. Against South Carolina, I'd love to see the run incorporated, especially against a pass rush that has been so ferocious. Because if you can get those guys on their heels, well, now Jalen's going to be able to operate, and he's already been operating at such a high level. But it's all about giving the defense more to think about. Much like the conversation we just had about Alabama's defense against Vandy, I don't think they gave Vanderbilt's offensive coordinator and Diego Pavia a whole lot to think about. When I go back to the first half against Georgia, they gave Bobo and Beck a lot to think about. A whole lot to think about. Against South Carolina, give them a lot to think about. Offensively, defensively. Give them a lot to think about. The more on your plate, the harder it is to find the point. So for Alabama, I do think it's premature to have this take. But I do understand that was an uncharacteristic loss, and there's no way we can argue it was a good loss. It was a bad loss. The interesting thing for Alabama right now is you hold probably the best win of the year in Georgia and one of the worst losses. So it's time for Alabama to show who they are. I still think this is an incredibly gifted team. But there are things that need to be figured out. And who knows, maybe in some roundabout way, that loss was a wake-up call and could serve as a very positive occurrence for this Alabama team in showing them, hey, we just slayed Georgia. We're flying high, but we are very human, just like everybody else. Possibly, this is a good thing. There's no way to tell until the games are played. I am being hopeful when I say that, and I won't shy away from that. But I also do disagree with Klatt, because I think it's far too early to say that when Alabama's defense was ranked as one of the best defenses in the nation up until the second half of Georgia and Vandy. And Georgia's a good football team. It's not like you were playing Bishop Sycamore. Georgia's incredibly talented. Has a lot of very talented guys on that roster. It's Georgia. And they were going to go for it on fourth down. So, can't wait to hear from all of you. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. In my opinion, the keys to victory this weekend against South Carolina, Keep that South Carolina defensive front on their heels. They have a ferocious pass rush. They are very talented up front. You want to do everything you can to have them second guessing what's happening. And Jalen Milroe's mobility will serve to do that. But the running backs, in my opinion, is a great way to not only maximize Jalen Milroe's mobility, but to also put that defensive front on their heels. I think Jalen Milroe is going to have yet another fantastic day throwing the football because he has had a fantastic year throwing the football. For Alabama's defense, you have got a very talented running back and you have got two mobile quarterbacks, whether it's Sellers or whether it's Ashford. You've got quarterbacks that can hurt you with their legs. You have got to play disciplined football, not only in execution, but in play calling. You've got to put your players in positions that makes it easier for them to succeed. Remember, this is about simplifying things. If you put something out and it's super complicated, super convoluted, and your guys have to do 100 things to try and get to the point of attack, that's not simplifying it. That's making it far harder than it needs to be. So I want to see execution be better. I don't want to see Alabama get pushed around up front again. But I also want to see the coaching staff put their players in better positions to succeed. And if all of that happens, I think we will see the Tide once again roll, and we will exit this game saying, hey, they had a bad loss. This is still an unbelievable football team, because I truly believe they still are. Hop down to the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.